when there is nothing to say, and yet the value of somebody's presence speaks way more loudly than whatever words they try and conjure up for the other person. And that is a picture of the value of presence, like you said, and Jesus emulated it. Even when Lazarus passed away, he could have raised him from the dead wherever he was. He did not need to be in front of the tomb to do it, but his presence was there to comfort the people who were grieving. Hey y'all, welcome to the My Place podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm your host, Mary McSwain, and I'm joined, as I normally am, by my dad, Jay McSwain.
So I think I kind of come standard. It's good to be joined today with you. Whatever, I kind of realize I'm sort of standard in you have the standard intro, and I kind of have it's nice to be joined by you today, but it really is. I enjoy. And you know what, Mary, it's kind of cool how many people that will tell me that know me. Y'all just seem like y'all get along so well. And
I think we do.
We really do. I mean, we've traveled a lot this spring and over the last couple of years, but we do get along well. But it is nice to be with you today here.
And we're sitting next to each other. This is the 100th time that we've sat across from one another.
No, it's not across from each other.
Because there were a couple times where it was on Zoom in college.
It was on when you were in, because we started these when you were in college.
Yeah.
And we would record them on a Zoom meeting, and then we just take the audio. But now we do both the audio and the video because it looks really nice in here. But this is our 100th. That's a milestone, Mary.
It is.
So, if you're watching, welcome to our milestone.
Do you have a favorite episode?
I don't. I know. Let me take that back. Yes, I do. Probably. I really, really, really enjoyed when you talked about your journey and how God brought you even to be a part of Place. I really enjoyed the one that Mike from your church came. That was cool to me. When your pastor, my pastor, came and we interviewed them, and Randy, and we ought to probably do it more. I'm sitting here naming people. Kristen came in. I think one of the things I've loved is having guests, which we probably don't do enough of. But I think of just you and I hearing your story. That was my favorite one.
I forgot about some of those episodes. The ones on the top of my head were definitely Randy and Charity. When they came in, I loved having them there and hearing parts of their story of how Place impacted their life that I hadn't heard before, and how that propelled them to the impact that they made on my life. And putting those pieces together that I didn't know about was so cool. And I loved when Hannah was on. She was on twice.
We need to have her on once a quarter at least.
I think we should.
You ought to go back and listen to the episode with that one. She was it like 46? Oh, I forget which, but it was good.
It was really good.
Oh, she was good.
And I got to shout out Mom. She's been on a couple of times with us, and she knocks it out of the park every single time.
Yeah.
So those have been really good. Last week, if y'all caught last week's episode, we talked about our time at Moody and how we go up there. You've gone up there for about 20 years now.
20 years now, yeah.
And coaching students and teaching Place. And I've gone the last 2 years. And it got me thinking about why in the world are we flying all the way up here when we could just get on Zoom with them? And so last week we talked about the value of the coaching session, why we don't just send them a bunch of books and say, take the assessment. It has some great material in there, but what the value of a coaching session is with the Place tool and what it can look like. But this week I want us to talk about something that you and Mom have actually taught me, and that's what y'all call the ministry of presence. So just to start it all off, what is the ministry of presence?
The ministry of presence is being dialed in and focused on the person that is in front of you and them being the most important person in your life at that moment because they're the one that God has put before you. Can I share a really cool story about this? So, as you know, kind of what I call my adopted kids, Craig and Ashley, and Craig is one of the best baseball players to ever play baseball. And I'll never forget, it was my first or second year as chaplain with the Braves. And there was a pastor from Dothan, Alabama, and he had a son that came to a game on a Saturday. He was 8 years old, and he happened to share the same birthday, May 28th, as Craig does. And I will never forget asking Craig, and I brought them, they came in way before they even opened the stands. And I asked Craig to go over to the edge of the field and to take a picture with the young man. And I will never forget Craig getting on his knees. And the little boy was about, yay tall, and Craig getting on his knees and looking at him and making him feel he was the most important person in all the world. And I think maybe for me, Mary, and I've never really even told Craig that, but maybe that was when it began to crystallize for me. But I certainly had that given to me, which I think is one of the questions you're going to ask long before that. But I think the consciousness of the power of the ministry of presence started 2011, 2012 for me.
Now, in scripture, we see Jesus spending his 3 years of ministry with his disciples, going all across Israel. Are there any ways that he practiced this in his ministry?
I think Jesus was so aware of every person around him. Remember, he was walking through the crowd, and the woman just felt like if she could touch him, that she had a disease or needed healing, and if she could just touch him, that she would be healed. And people are all around him, and he was aware that someone touched him. You remember the woman that was caught in adultery? And he leaned down to her, and everybody wanted to stone her, and he was so different. I mean, you could go over and over in Scripture and see that. Again, what's the show that is real popular on the channel? That
The Chosen?
The Chosen, yeah. And we really don't know what everything was like, but I can only imagine that when Jesus talked to people, that he looked them directly in the eye, and he wasn't looking around to see who was who or who was around. But I think he did that every person that he encountered.
Do you think in today's society, because obviously Jesus was perfect, he is the example that is set for all of us, but also they didn't have as many distractions back then. And even with the way that we live and experience the world today, do you think we've at all devalued the value of presence?
100% we've devalued it, yes.
How so? How do you think that plays out?
I think it plays out in not listening to people. I told you I had something I was going to share that was going to be a little bit different. So think about social media, and that's kind of where we're going, is that these things right here kind of control us, right? Do you have people that you send a message to them and they don't respond back, or it may be the next day that they respond back?
Oh, yeah, I'm guilty of it too, though.
Okay. I think we all could do well. The Bible says, and watch me be, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, but this thing, the ministry of presence, it's one of the reasons that I'll respond back to people pretty quickly. I don't always have the ability on my phone, but I know how it feels when other people don't respond back to me, but maybe I'm in a group thread and somebody else they sense is more important and they respond back to them. I laugh about this. At church, I think I sit on the front row, and my pastor sits on the front row, and I watch people look to see if he'll catch their eye, and if he says something, they don't even acknowledge me. And again, I'm not the pastor, and he is, but the ministry of presence, it just makes you feel valued. And I hope as I get older that I'm not as focused as much on the crowd as I am the person that is in front of me at that moment.
My senior pastor at my church talks about this a lot, how we are more connected than ever and yet also more isolated than ever before because so many of our interactions exist through a screen. You can keep up relationships with people just by texting them, never seeing their face, never hearing their voice. You can keep up with people that you haven't seen in years through social media, which there is pros to that. But while we are so well connected to people, so many people feel so disconnected from society, from their relationships, from the world, because we're allowing our relationships to exist through a screen and we're settling for a counterfeit while also being discontent with the way that our lives operate, even though we've settled for a counterfeit because we're still talking to people, we're still interacting. And I think, especially with the way that we live in the world today, the ministry of presence is even more valuable because it's something that so many of our devices have taken away from us and so many of the ways that we do life, even with going to Moody. We could have done those coaching sessions on Zoom, but there's so much more value when somebody has taken the time and given the space to sit right in front of you and to pour into you and to listen to you. And we talked in the last episode about the value of listening, but to be able to listen while also giving you their presence, that combination is really powerful in somebody's life.
You know, it was so interesting to me, and it's been almost 20 years ago now. I was taking a group of college students through Place at our church. And at the end of it, I was going to demonstrate a one-on-one coaching session in front of all the students. And there was a young lady in there, and she had done she was doing modeling. She was beautiful. I mean, she's still at our church and she's still beautiful. But I knew everybody would want to hear her story because she was so stunningly beautiful, but yet she was a lot of times kind of reserved and wasn't kind of in the mix of the group. And when I looked at her Place profile where it says felt passions, the people that you have a passion for, her number one, where it said people group, it was lonely individuals. And I'll never forget what that young lady, I said to her, I said, why do you have lonely individuals as your number one passion group? And she said, because I'm lonely. And it wasn't long after that I began seeing this trend. And so a few years later, I was going to Brentwood Baptist Church, which has taken thousands and thousands of people through Place, and they were asking me to go and talk to and they had at that point, about 50 people working in Place. And I was supposed to give them some trends to their church. So I spent a lot of time looking at the database that we provide them. And they had thousands of people in there. And as you know, you can search in it. And so I'd started seeing this with younger people, lonely individuals. And so I did the search. If you were under 30 at their church, and your number one passion group was lonely individuals. Percentage-wise, Mary, it was like astronomical compared to people that were older who did not have lonely individuals. And I thought to myself, that age group, now you're the most connected people that the world has ever had, but yet the most lonely. The ministry of presence, I believe that so many people that even physically have issues emotionally, mentally, could be removed if we would just learn to value talking to each other face to face, not through whatever way. Sorry,
Wow.
I'm getting on some soapboxes today.
That's a powerful statistic,
sorry.
though.
Yeah, it is unbelievable if you took our database and took that one criteria, under 20, number one passion, lonely individual. And I saw it even in some of the students that I coached at Moody, even 2 weeks ago. I see that with younger people, and yet they're the most connected.
You mentioned this earlier while explaining what it can look like, that you've experienced it long before you crystallized really what it meant and how you articulated it. Over the years, how have different people shown it to you?
Well, the first person that I remember that ever showed it to me that I have never forgotten, he died in 1994, and it was my spiritual father. And I think it was the first time that whenever I would be, and every time I was in his presence, he would look me in the eyes. And when I would talk, he would always focus on what I was saying. And I never felt like he was thinking, now how can I answer that? He was totally dialed in to me and would look me in the eyes. And I'll never forget, every time I would leave him, and I was with him the day before he died, which I didn't see him a lot in those years, but I happened to have breakfast with him the day before in my hometown. And every time he would leave me, he would look me in the eyes and he would say, I love you. He didn't look as he was walking, I love you. He'd look me straight in the eyes and he would always say, I love you. And then I remember the first, and I'll call it well-known pastor that I ever met. It was my senior year of college, and it's the only time I ever met this person, even though I actually went on one of his cruises years later with your mom. But the only time I ever face-to-face met Dr. Charles Stanley, one of the most well-known pastors in my lifetime. I met him on a Sunday night after church at First Baptist Church, Atlanta. I was a senior in college, and some people that knew him well said, do you want to meet Dr. Stanley? And I said, yes, I'd love to. And I'll never forget, he sat there, this nothing of a senior in college, and for 2 or 3 minutes, just kind of, and he looked me in the eyes, and he wasn't looking, and there were a lot of people around, because he was well known even then. He wasn't looking around, but he looked at me and acted like what I said was really important. And I'm sure what I said wasn't really important, but he sure acted like it was.
And I remember your spiritual father, y'all used to always go on runs
Yeah.
in Vidalia. And I think even that, him offering his presence to you and being willing to show up, there could be nothing profound said on one of those runs, but you'll remember that he showed up to do something so simple just to be in your presence. And I think even that stuck out because I'm sure you can't remember what all was said.
I can remember some things.
You can remember some things, but you might not remember every single
Not
thing.
the hundreds of runs we made, no.
But you remember there were hundreds of runs.
There were hundreds
There
of
were
them.
hundreds of times that he showed up and that he was present. And on the one hand, you have to be willing to give your presence, but also the value of somebody else being willing to give theirs speaks volumes, and you'll remember that for a lifetime.
Yeah.
So you've talked a lot about how people have shown it to you. What impact have you seen it have on others?
One of the things that I hear a lot is that if you take the time to be with others and to listen to what they say, and then in the conversation 30 minutes later, you come back and say something that they said to you, the number of times I've heard, I can't believe you remembered that. And it's like, well, you told it to me 30 minutes ago. But that's how I've seen the impact that it has is that you can see people, it's like, wow, you remembered that, or you were listening. The number of times I've heard people say, you were listening to me. And that's how I've seen it impact people, is that I think most people are really amazed that, one, that you would sit and give them the time, but secondly, that you would remember what they say when you give them the time. Mary, I think it was 2 years ago, I do a service, as you know, at Truist Park where the Atlanta Braves play on Sunday mornings, and I do it in the stadium. They put it up on the screen, and right after I finish it, I go straight from in the stadium where I speak to where the police officers are. And it's a pretty tight time that I have to, because they're not sitting there saying, we're going to wait till the preacher gets here to start. So I have to kind of push it to get there. And a person stopped me. And I think I was distracted. I wasn't practicing the ministry of presence really well. And I'm so sorry. I know you're so busy. And it just, Holy Spirit, whatever, I think it was, just hit me. And I stopped and I said, I'm so sorry. I don't have anything more important than you right now because you're the person, and please forgive me for acting like I was too busy to listen to you. And I've had other times where I've recognized that, but one of the things I'm grateful to the Lord as I get older, I'm beginning to realize how valuable the ministry of presence and dialing into someone else is.
That's one of the things that I've learned as a kid watching you and mom in your marriage together and how you serve other people through it. For one, at the Braves, getting to just watch you walk around the entire stadium just to say hello to somebody, give them a hug and look them in the eye and tell them that you love them. There were so many nights growing up where you would go to the stadium, not because you had something to do, but because the value of your presence being there for those other people, to look them in the eyes and to say hello, or to go ask them how something in their lives that had happened earlier that week that you knew about, to go ask them a question, to give them a listening ear. How many times you sat in the dugout talking to people in the middle of the week when I know that you had other things to do, and the way that you have pursued people there and given your presence to them has shown me the value of that. And the amount of people that when I go with you will say, we just love your dad. He is so amazing. And the majority of their interactions with you have been you just walking up to them, saying that you love them and giving them a hug. And even that little bit of presence is so valuable to them. And I think that, and even when Maggie and I were in college, you would drive all the way to Birmingham, or for Maggie, all the way to Athens just to have dinner with us. And that showed us the value of presence and the value of taking time and creating space in somebody else's life to sit down in front of them, because just being together was valuable enough and worth your time to create space for. And I've learned that from you. I've watched mom do it with so many people as well, where she'll drop everything to go be with people that are hurting. And she'll fly across the country even to be with people that are hurting. And I've watched y'all and learned so much about what that can look like through y'all's marriage and through just watching you as your kid.
When you look in the scriptures, Job, who lost all of his wealth, was considered, the Elon Musk of wealth in 3,500, however many years ago it was, lost all of his 10 kids, and then got physically, just unbelievable physical suffering he went through. His friends, if you remember the story, the first few days, they did the right thing. They gave the ministry of presence. And you remember what they did then? They had to start talking, and they had to start giving all these opinions. And you know what was fascinating about that? I've written this in my Bible. Some of those opinions were they were right, but not in the context of Job. And I say this all the time, in the beginning, they gave him the ministry of presence, but in the end, they should have given, I think God said, you need to shut up, because that is not the ministry that you need. I don't know what God said to him, but I look at that story, and sometimes it's just a matter of showing up. I had a man that was in my mentoring group about 3 years ago. Last year, his daughter took her life. And I remember the first couple of days going to their house, and there was nothing to say. And I would just sit there, and he would cry. I can't make, and what, I didn't have anything to say. And it was the ministry of presence. It's one of the most lacking things in our society today.
That is a beautiful example that Jesus emulated in times, especially of grieving, when there is nothing to say, and yet the value of somebody's presence speaks way more loudly than whatever words they try and conjure up for the other person. And that is a picture of the value of presence, like you said, and Jesus emulated it. Even when Lazarus passed away, he could have raised him from the dead wherever he was. He did not need to be in front of the tomb to do it, but his presence was there to comfort the people who were grieving, even though he didn't have words to say. It said that Jesus wept. He didn't give this grand speech saying that everything was going to be okay. He gave them his presence and then he wept with them. And that is a picture of what the ministry of presence does. It meets people exactly where they are and whatever they're going through. And it says that your presence and your feelings, wherever you are, is valuable enough for me to create space to sit in it with you.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
How have you seen, because we always like to tie it back a little bit to place, how have you seen people's gifts expressed while practicing the ministry of presence?
You know, again, different people have different personalities, different spiritual gifts. And I think people that are confident when they're in other people's presence, they give the presence of confidence. And not by, like, one of my favorite people is Matt Stinscomb. As he's our neighbor and he played football at Georgia's, well-known former NFL football player. But Matt, every time I'm around him, he always is interested in me. He'll always ask about you girls, but he has a confidence about him. And that's what I just feel like he exudes. You know, your mom, she has the ministry of empathy with people, and she just is so calming because she's such a good listener when people are talking. Some people, they have the ministry of just making it feel good to be around them and fun. And then some people, it's like they just know how to ask the questions and really go a little bit deeper than just the surface. And again, I just went through the DISC personalities, but giftings, someone who has a spiritual gift of wisdom. And when they give you that ministry of presence, because they're dialed in and they can give you some really practical steps to take and insight of how to apply something in your life. Every person is going to do it based on how they are. And the person that is walking in step with the Spirit will say, okay, sometimes I need to set aside who I am, and I may not have the gift of, but I need to fulfill the role of with this person. But so oftentimes, you will see people who have certain personalities, certain gifts, that is the way they will project their presence through those gifts and that personality.
You know, the common denominator, as you were talking about all of that and all of the different ways that you can minister to somebody's life, is the person doing it had to be willing to give their presence in the first place.
Yes.
Whether wherever you use your spiritual gifts, however you play a role in somebody else's life, the common denominator to helping others and to leaving that impact and using what the Lord has given you to impact others is your presence. Whether it's giving a word of advice because you were locked in, you were listening, whether it's sitting and crying with them because you brought a box of tissues, whether it's organizing. You're not great with the advice, you're not great with the tears, but you can go clean their house for them. The amount of times that mom has done my laundry or brought me food or helped me clean my house, because she has the spiritual gift of helps. And she just comes alongside if that's what I need. And just her presence being there. Even when I used to pack, I hate packing for trips. She used to always just sit there in my room so that I could ask her what I need. Her presence being there, like so many other people who have impacted my life a great deal. What I remember about it was their willingness to be there and to sit with me in it. And that's the value of the ministry of presence. And however you demonstrate that through the way that the Lord has wired and gifted you will be unique to you. But again, the common denominator is your willingness to sit with the other person.
your willingness to show up. You know, last year I got an award, and it was with the team that you played on, the Buford Lady Wolves basketball, and I got the Fan Appreciation Award. And I don't know how many times your coach has come up to me and just hugged my neck and told me he loved me and how much it means that I would be sitting in those. I don't holler, as you know. I just show up, and my presence is there. I don't make speeches. I don't have any involvement with the team other than I show up. And, you know, I know this is silly, but this is one of my probably most cherished things that I've ever received, because it is the ministry of presence, and that I show up. And your coach, former coach, Gene Durden, always just says to me, Jay, it means so much to me just having you sitting across in those stands, game after game, year after year. It's the ministry of presence.
And I know it means a lot to him. We do have to wrap up our conversation for today. Thank you all again for joining us. We hope that you found it valuable or encouraging. I would encourage y'all to consider thinking and reflecting on some of the ways that you're able to give your presence, how the giving of your presence will not only fill somebody else's cup, but even refill your cup, because fellowshipping with other believers and spending time with people in real life is what we were created for. It's what we were designed for, to live in fellowship with one another. And when you pour out, there's a way that God pours right back into you. So I would encourage y'all to reflect on your life in the ways that people have poured into you, but also ways that you could pour your presence out to others. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you back here next week.